All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for attending today's webinar, 5 Tips for Educators Who Want to Implement Design Thinking. While you wait for things to get started, please feel free to take the 3-question survey in the middle of your screen. If you're watching the archive, we will still receive your answers, so we would appreciate your feedback as well. And before we begin, I have just a couple of housekeeping items that I want to go over. At the bottom of your audience console are multiple application widgets that you can use during the webinar and while watching the archive. If you have any questions during the webinar, you can click on the Q&A widget at the bottom and submit your question. We will try to answer those during the webinar, but if a fuller answer is needed or we run out of time, we will answer you later via email, and we do capture all questions, again, including those submitted when watching the archive. If you're watching the live session, we encourage you to share ideas and ask your questions through the blue group chat widget. It has 2 speech bubbles on it. I will also be posting links throughout the webinar for additional resources. A copy of today's slides and additional information is available in the green resource list widget that looks like a folder at the bottom of your screen. You can expand the slide area by clicking on the maximize icon to the top right of the slide area, or by dragging the bottom right corner of the slide area. You can minimize any of the widget areas by clicking on the minimize icon in the top right corner of that window. If you have any technical difficulty, please click on the Help widget. It has a question mark icon and covers common technical issues. An on-demand version of the webcast will be available approximately 1 day after the webcast and can be accessed using the same audience link that was sent to you earlier when you registered for this. Feel free to share what you're learning on Twitter with the hashtag FEK12. All right, so let's get started. My name is Katie Seamer, and I am just getting us started today. Michael Roush, my wonderful colleague, is actually going to be leading the content portion of today's webinar. He is awesome and knows all kinds of stuff about design thinking, so I'm excited to continue that learning with him through this webinar. And so very quickly, who is Forward Edge? Just a little bit about who we are. We are a K-12 technology company. And when I say that, I mean we do all things technology for schools, including selling hardware, setting up and managing wireless networks. And we even have our own cabling team that will pull and run cables to hang APs and move projectors and all sorts of stuff. And about 2 years ago, this month actually, we decided to focus heavily on curriculum and technology integration. So that is where Michael and I and our team come in. So once you have that technology in teachers and students' hands, how can you use it effectively? And so in the C&I department, we come with an education background, classroom experience, and in short, we offer visioning and planning services, provide professional development, and we serve as on-site integration coaches to a handful of districts. So here's the agenda today, and I'm going to kick it over to Michael so he can get us going.
All right, hi there. Hopefully everybody can hear me now. It looks like my microphone icon is bobbing up and down, so everybody should be hearing me now. It's good to have everybody here for this. The agenda looks pretty short, but we've got a lot that's packed into it. We're going to do a little bit of a review of what is design thinking. And then we're going to get into those 5 tips, those 5 rules, and there's going to be historical examples that come along with those. That's going to make up the bulk of our time today. And then at the end, we're going to have a little bit of time to just kind of do some reflection, do some speculation about what your classroom might look like tomorrow as a result of what we do here. So with that agenda in mind, I do want to start with a little little survey that we're going to ask you to take. And I just want to ask, how familiar are you with the design thinking process? Maybe you've never heard of it, or you've heard of it but not really sure what it is. Maybe you know a little about it, never really done it. or maybe you actually are fairly familiar about it and you've used it. So I'm going to leave this up there for just a couple more seconds for you to answer, and then we're going to take a look at the results. All right. Hey, every teacher's dream. Differentiation opportunities abound. We've got about a third spread across different areas. So we are going to take a good hard look at some of these areas, and hopefully with this kind of a spread, everybody's going to be able to leave with something that they can use out of the material we've got planned in here today. So even if you've never heard of it before, no problem, no worries. We are going to make sure we've got some things in here that meet everybody where they're at. So let's take a little bit of a look at just what is this idea of design thinking. If I have to define it, and you will find a lot of different definitions online for this, but I kind of like this definition for some of the adjectives it uses. Design thinking is a collaborative, human-centered approach to developing and implementing solutions to real-world problems. And you will often see it laid out with this these 5 steps, this 5-step process that is listed on the slide here. Now, even though I call it a 5-step process, that makes it tempting to think of it as a checklist or a linear progression, and it's not. You will find as we go through some of this that you can loop around in this. You can jump back and forth a little bit with some of the things that we're doing. But let's take a look at these steps of design thinking as they're laid out before we get into the tips. First one is to empathize, and this is an easy one to skip. This is an easy one to miss. Empathizing means really actually figuring out and getting a better definition of what the problem is. There's a problem, there's an opportunity, there's a challenge because someone has perceived that barrier or perceived that opportunity. And so taking some time to really, before we start throwing out possible solutions, to really figure out what it is that the person or the people, the stakeholders that are involved, what are they perceiving? What are they seeing as the problem? What are the issues? What do they wish? What do they want? What is bothering them? Taking some time to really empathize and ask questions before we start throwing out solutions is a big step to making design thinking work. Once we've done that work of empathy, of empathizing, which really does continue throughout everything that we do in this process, then we can really do a good job of defining the problem and coming to an idea of what we're really going to be working on. That allows us to ideate. And by ideate, I mean let's put together as many possible ideas as we can. Even the craziest notions that you might think of at this point, it's good to get them out because there are pieces of them we might use later. And so getting all of those ideas, putting those out and doing a real good brainstorming process pays big dividends later on. Because after that, then we get to the point where we want to prototype. We want to start building live models that we can use. We want to really start trying things and trying them in safe and small ways even to start with. But that helps us gain even more information, especially from those users that we focused on back at the empathy stage to make sure that the solution solves their problem and their issues. A great solution that doesn't solve the original problem really isn't a great solution. And that gives us this last opportunity to really test. That once we've got that prototype together that we think addresses the needs, test it, put it into place, put it in the hands of the people who are going to be using it, and get their feedback on what they think and how it works and how well it does what it was intended to do. And as you can probably see now through all this, why I said at the beginning that it's really not a linear process. You can end up jumping around in this process a lot as you go through it, as you try to come up with these collaborative, human-centered approaches when we're dealing with real-world problems. There's another way that you might see this represented, and this one comes from a great website called Design Thinking for Educators. Design Thinking for Educators is a website and a toolkit that was developed by the good folks at IDEO, that's IDEO, and you'll see some more of their stuff later on in this presentation as well. It takes those same 5 phases of the design process, and instead of giving them the names that we had already used, it uses names like discovery, interpretation. You see ideation in there, experimentation, and evolution. There are also sentences, statements, and questions that go along with these. So it's, I have a challenge. How do I approach it? I learned something. How do I interpret it? And so, there is an entire toolkit that you can go there and get for free that walks you through some samples and walks you through some ways to do this yourself with really any size of a challenge or an issue that you might come up against. One great way to begin developing a sense of what this empathy part means and what it can how important it is to the process is the Shadow a Student Challenge. Any of you who may be on Twitter, especially some of the admins out there, may be familiar with this and some of the work that's happened through this Shadow a Student Challenge, where somebody from the school, usually it's an administrator, but sometimes it's a teacher or someone else, another adult, someone from the community, who actually takes an entire day and goes around with one student for one entire school day. They don't propose any solutions. They don't propose any fixes or anything during that day. The entire point of that day is to get an idea of what the school day is like from the student's perspective. And that builds empathy. That's a way for us to really kind of get an idea of where the challenges are, where the successes are, what's going really well, and what might need some attention. And sometimes we find those things, things that really have stayed uncovered until we take the time to really be empathetic with something like this. One of the things that the Shadow a Student Challenge asks is that if you are shadowing a student, one great thing to do is to make notes, take pictures as you go. And one great tool for doing that is Google Keep. If you already have a note-taking tool, some kind of electronic note-taking tool that you use, that's great. If not, I would recommend Google Keep to you. If you already have a Google account, a Google Apps for Education account, you already have this all ready to go. It is now in your standard Google Suite package now, actually. Keep has been added to that. And so you can use Google Keep to make notes, to make very, very quick notes as you go. You can type in text. You can also add pictures right along inside here. You can also use hashtags just like you would use them on social media to assign labels to your Google Keep notes. And now, as a result of some updates that Google has made, your notes that you put in Google Keep can be accessed directly from Docs when you're working with them in Drive, which is a fantastic little addition that Google has put into place with Google Keep now to make it an even more powerful note-taking tool. All right, so with those that 5-phase process of design thinking in mind, we are going to take a look now at something that I've termed 5 rules of design thinking. For purposes of this workshop, we're talking about 5 tips. Because when I say rules, you're going to find out very early on that these rules are more like guidelines, suggestions, methodologies, tools for the toolbox that you might use as you're going through that design thinking process, especially as it applies to the work that we do in education and instructional and curriculum design. Need to say a couple of quick thank yous to this. Every time I do this, I always try to say a word of thanks to the inspirations for these rules. They originally came from a guy named Cameron Sinclair in his work in architectural design. His rules were picked up and used by my friend Leonie Watson, who applied them to her work in software and web design. And when I heard them, I realized that the work that they were talking about, the attention and the human-centeredness of what they were talking about, applied just as well to what we do in instructional design as it did to their work. I asked them if they would mind if I used their rules for this, and they were more than happy for me to use the rules for this. And so I'm thrilled to give them a little note of thanks as I do this. So let's go into the rules now. Rule number 1 is to teach like you're Banksy. By that I mean, read the rule book, then rip it up, and create something that challenges the accepted wisdom. Now, I may have used a name that some of you are not familiar with, so I'm actually going to ask right now. There's another poll that has come up on your screen. I just said teach like you're Banksy, so I want to know, have you ever heard of this guy Banksy? Either no, you've never heard of him, yeah, but I don't know anything about him, yeah, and I know a little bit about him, or I've watched the entire documentary, Exit Through the Gift Shop, that's about him. I'll give you a couple more seconds to look through those options and choose one for me, and then I will jump ahead to the answers. All right. Yep, this is about typical. Hey, I've got one that's actually watched the whole documentary. That is super cool. But this is not very uncommon that half or more have never even heard of this guy. So let me give you a quick little rundown on who he is. Banksy is a street artist. And he is from England, but he has done some of his street art in many, many different places, including New York City, Los Angeles, New Orleans, so some places in the U.S. as well. And some people describe him as an important activist through his street art. Some people just describe him as a common trespassing thug who goes around scrawling graffiti on other people's private property. And the funny part about it is the way you describe his work oftentimes seems to have to do with what you think of his cause, more so than than the methods that he chooses. Now, we don't get a lot of rule breakers a lot in education. When I tell people this first rule that read the rule book and rip it up and create something that challenges the accepted wisdom, there's a lot of people who kind of balk and hesitate at that because they don't think of themselves as a rule breaker. The people who were rule breakers when they were students in school don't tend to grow up to become educators an awful lot. But the ones who do, I think, offer us something very unique. And actually, I think that most of us are rule breakers whether we know it or not. This set of questions, I've got 5 questions now, true, false. These are not going to come up as poll questions or anything. They're just going to come up on some slides. I want you to kind of keep track in your head or on a piece of paper or something nearby of your true, false answers to these questions about the rules for the board game Monopoly. So here we go. Question number 1 on the board game Monopoly. True or false, you may not buy property until after you have gone all the way around the board at least once. Is that true or is that false? All right, so get your answer in mind on that one. Question number 2. When another player lands on property you own, you do not collect rent if you are in jail. Is that true or false, according to the rules of Monopoly? All right. Question number 3. When you land on an unowned property and you don't buy it, your turn ends and the next player rolls. Is that true or false? Okay, so you've got 3 answers now. Question number 4. When you pass go, you collect $200. If you land on go by exact count, you collect double, $400. True or false? And then question number 5, money that gets paid from luxury tax, income tax, chance, and community chest cards goes into a separate pile. And when someone lands on free parking, they get the money. True or false? All right. So hopefully you've had a chance to answer all of those in your head or on a scratch piece of paper. And now I'm going to give you the answers to all of those. According to the published rules of the board game Monopoly, every one of those is in fact false. And actually, I can also tell you that I have never played a game of Monopoly that did not use one of those rules. Okay, so nobody really plays Monopoly just by the published rules. We all have these little house rules that we use. Sometimes they make the game go slower, sometimes they make the game go faster, sometimes they make the game maybe louder, sometimes they make the game go a little quieter. Sometimes we think they make the game more fair. Some of those rules actually probably make the game less fair. But every rule that we change when we play Monopoly that we keep, we did it for a very special and very important reason. It made the game more fun. And that is the key that we're talking about when we're talking about reading the rule book and then ripping it up and create something that challenges the accepted wisdom. want to take a look at an article, some findings from an ISTE article back in 2015, so not that long ago. We have some traditional methods that we've used over time in the classroom, like where the teacher is the one who dispenses the information. We follow a uniform pacing guide. We give a test at the end of each unit to find out whether the students have learned anything or not. And this article on 3 ways to increase student engagement in your classroom talked about 3 different ways that you could address those. One was to reach students through technology. Instead of just being the teacher dispensing all the information. Secondly, you've got being able to teach at the pace your students learn best instead of forcing them all into a pacing guide. And third suggestion that article makes is to check knowledge in real time so that when the test comes, it's not a surprise to the student or the teacher what happens when the test is given. If you want to take a look at that article, don't forget to take a look in the group chat. Katie is posting some links there, and the link to this article is there as well that you can get to. Also, if you've got anything else you want to say, you want to throw in any comments, questions, or anything you want to toss in the group chat, you can do that, as well as if you wanted to use the Q&A widget for any specific questions that you have. But take a look at that ISTE article for some information about how to increase engagement, which is pretty much the word that we educators use when we want to say we want to increase how much fun we're having. So, rule number 1, read the rule book, rip it up, create something that challenges accepted wisdom. Rule number 2, teach like you're Leonardo da Vinci. Now, if you didn't know who Banksy was, likely you know who Leonardo da Vinci is. The rule on this one is to be curious about everything. Never stop questioning how you can make things better. Here's another little poll, and you can actually choose multiple options on this, so you're not stuck with just one. In which fields are you most familiar with Leonardo da Vinci's work? Engineering, physics, botany, anatomy, and art. Sorry for those who might have expected to see the fact that he was that one of the Ninja Turtles is named after him is not in the list. But go ahead and look through that. Pick which fields you're most familiar with Da Vinci's work. All right, give that another couple seconds, and then... All right, a lot for engineering and a lot for art. He made significant contributions in all of these areas, and it just doesn't seem right to pin him to any one of them. It's interesting that, you know, half of us are saying, yeah, we know him for his engineering work, and half say, yeah, we know him for his art. There are way too many schools in existence these days where if you were a student and you wanted to take engineering, it's at the same period as art, and so you can't take both classes at the same time. And so that forces us to be a little curious about things and how we can actually change things to make things better. Da Vinci allowed his curiosity about different fields to inform how he worked in other fields. I want to take a few moments here and think about how you would design a hamster habitat. Think of the kind of things that you would need. If you were going to get a hamster here in a few minutes, what kind of stuff would you have to put together for that hamster to live, to thrive, to survive in that habitat? So think about a few things that you would put together. You got a kind of an idea in mind for all the kind of things that you would add, that you would put together for that hamster. All right. Now, what I would like for you to do is take a look at these 3 little hamsters. Pick one that kind of looks nice to you, that kind of sticks out to you, and we are going to give you that hamster. But there's a twist. Your hamster has a little description there that you might want to read through. Now, each one of these hamsters that's on there, the descriptions are actually descriptions of a student. Each one is a description of a student that I've known somewhere back in my educational past. And so the challenge now, after you read that description, is how would you have to change the environment you thought of to make it suitable for this hamster? I do this with larger groups sometimes, and it's interesting because the likelihood is that when you thought of the things that you would have to change to make the environment, if there was anything you had to change, to make the environment suitable for this hamster, you thought of things that you would add to the environment. Very rarely do we think of things that we would think we would have to take away from the environment. Or never do we think, well, you know what? This environment that I thought of is completely unsuitable, so we're going to have to put this hamster in a completely separate place for this. And so that is an example of that kind of curiosity that gets involved. Be curious, never stop thinking about how we can make things better. And then when we think of those things that can make things better, when we think of the changes that we would make, they're almost always about adding to the environment, putting something else in there that makes it suitable. We think of changing, we can come up with ways to change the environment instead of ways to change the kid. If you want to take a look at the original Hamster Challenge activity, that is available on Stanford's D-School website as a whole kit full of materials. There are several different projects on this page that Katie has posted that you can go to and that you can find there. But the Hamster Challenge is one of them that's in there. That's a great one to use with groups of teachers. Another example on this one that most of us may be more familiar with is the shopping cart. And there is an example of a shopping cart there on the left. That shopping cart looks very, very similar to the kind of the very first shopping carts that I remember going to the grocery store with my grandmother. They haven't changed much from that, except now they're bigger and they hold more groceries. That's about the only change. The photo in the middle shows what probably looks to you like a very, very futuristic looking shopping cart. That shopping cart is made very, very differently in several different ways. There is an improved seating area to hold a child up by the handle. This cart actually doesn't have a bottom in it. It holds a series of hand baskets that you can place the groceries in and rearrange and move around as you need to. It also has a set of hooks and other things on it to hold bags or to hold other materials on it. There is no axle on that futuristic-looking cart. It actually has casters at all four sides, so the cart can move sideways just as easily as it moves forward and back. And that last picture shows an interesting little addition, an adaptation. It's a little hand scanner that you can use to scan the groceries as you're going through the store. If you need to check the price on something, or you just want to go ahead and add it into your order, you can go ahead and scan those. And some of you have probably seen that, and it's starting to hit grocery stores these days. I know I saw the first one. I think last year was the first grocery store I went into that had one of those. Well, actually, that very futuristic-looking shopping cart was designed in 1999. And Katie has posted the link to IDEO's website where they reimagined the shopping cart for an episode of a TV show called Nightline. And so nowadays we are starting to see some of these adaptations, some of these changes being added. But sometimes the going is a little slow on when these things are added. And it's a matter of being curious, but to never stop thinking about how we can make things better, how we can improve things, and where we see opportunities for advancement and growth, even in the routine things that we do. And there are a lot of routine things that we do in school, especially around technology. A book recommendation that I would make if you want to look more into this, Michael Gelb's book, How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci. There's a workbook that goes along with this. Fabulous set of books if you're really interested in reading some more about this. If you are the type who is more of a doer on these things, though, and you want to look more into this rule about be curious about everything, never stop questioning how you can make things better, you might want to visit a website called universalleonardo.com. That takes a lot of the materials from the different realms that Leonardo worked in and gives you a lot of online virtual manipulatives and activities that you can do online to apply the principles that Leonardo worked under and some of the discoveries and inventions that he had. All right, rule number 3 then is to teach like you are Coco Chanel. And I already mentioned that these rules came from Cameron Sinclair and Leonie Watson. When I came to this one, I felt like I was clueless about what this one really meant and what it really would mean for us. But the rule on this one is to strive for beauty and elegance, But understand that those things are different for different people. And this rule really hit home to me when I was reminded of an activity from the folks at CAST, and I have adapted that for this. There is a picture on the screen there, and that picture is a version of a painting called The Unexpected Visitors. And so take a look at that for just a minute, and then I'm going to ask you, based on what you've seen, I'm going to ask you a question. So take just another couple of seconds to look at that picture. And now, the people in the picture, were they mostly happy? Were they mostly sad? Or were they mostly, you couldn't tell one way or the other? Let's take a few seconds to think of that and submit an answer. And then we will jump ahead and see what everybody said. All right. Everybody on this instance said they thought the people in the picture were mostly happy. And that's usually what I get when I put that picture out there. But now, I want to take a look at something else that we can do with this that changes it. I can show that same picture to two different groups. But if I change the background music that I give them, something very interesting happens. I'll give Group A the same picture, the same instructions, and I'll give them the background music Stornelli Amorisi, which is a real lighthearted Italian aria. I'll take another group and I'll give them the same picture. I will give them the same instructions, but I will give them a very different set of background music. I'll give them Barber's Adagio for strings, which is widely considered to be one of the saddest, most somber pieces of music ever written. And then, when I start asking people to share their descriptions of what was in the picture, I get very different responses. Group A, the Stornelli Amorisi group, does what our group here has done. They give me descriptions like it's a very happy scene, it's a joyful reunion. These people are pleasantly surprised to see who has come through the door. The people who got the sad, somber music in the background describe it as a sad scene. Somebody's bringing bad news. They're talking about loss or death that has happened, that's happening, being depicted in this picture. And it all changes. The perspective gets changed based on that background music. You can try this experiment yourself if you have a group of people that you want to do it with. The link for that is at the bottom of this slide. If you want to be able to go back to that and get a hold of it. You can also find the unexpected visitor picture online. I do it just by handing out a set of playing cards. And the one that I've got on there is... The way I've got the experiment set up is whatever suit of a playing card people get, they use that one. That's the version that they look at. I think the heart and the diamond get the lighthearted, the happy version, and the club and the spade get the sad, somber version. But you can run this experiment yourself just to see how much that background music really affects and really changes how people perceive what we say and what we do. It's no wonder that when we try to give a whole classroom full of students, we give them the same instructions, we give them the same materials, we try to give them the same presentation, and then we get very, very different responses and very, very different perceptions from them. Because every one of our students is coming into the room with a very different set of background music going on, from how their day has been to how their evening was the day before. And so it makes a huge difference in how we perceive. Another way that it makes a big difference in how we perceive was found down in Broward County, Florida, recently, a couple years ago, when their routine for identifying students as gifted was, if a teacher thought a student should be referred to be tested to see if they qualified for a gifted program, the teacher would submit a name, and they would contact them, and then they would do the screening. They got a research grant to test every kid in the district for their gifted program. They found out that large numbers of poor and minority students that had never been referred to their gifted program qualified easily for their gifted program. Students that they had just never really found much reason to believe that about them. The entire article is posted in the group chat if you want to take a look at it. And for them, it was a real eye-opener for them that the study suggested that there was a lot of talent out there that they were missing. And they were missing it because of some of that background music that was going on that caused them not to perceive things the way that that other folks might have. Rule number 3, then, was to teach like your Coco Chanel, to strive for beauty and elegance, but understand that those things are different for different people. Rule number 4 is to teach like you are Isambard Kingdom Brunel. And this rule says to know that planning is important, but that imagination is what really makes the extraordinary possible. And now this is probably an unfamiliar name for some of you as well, so I'm going to go ahead and ask the question on this one too. Have you heard of Isambard Kingdom Brunel before? Either no, never heard of him, yes, but I know nothing about him, or yes, I know who he is. All right, and our answers on that one. Oh, everybody says, yep, no, I've never heard of this guy. And that's very, very common for me to find here with my audiences, is that nobody really has ever heard of this guy. But I have a picture that I can show you that in most of my audiences, then suddenly about at least half of the people do recognize this next picture that I'm going to show you. The guy on the right is Isambard Kingdom Brunel. The guy on the left, the character on the left, is Sir Topham Hatt from the Thomas the Tank Engine stories. Yes, the character on the left was kind of fashioned and modeled after I.K. Brunel. So if you're familiar with anything about Sir Topham Hatt, now suddenly you know something about I.K. Brunel. Brunel was an engineer's engineer. He built ships, tunnels, trains, all sorts of things that were not just that weren't just common. He wanted to do a lot of very first of its kind or never been done before types of projects, and he knew that if you wanted to do things that had never been done before, you would have to do them in ways that had never been tried before. And so I really love this quote from Chris Lemon, and I have only had the opportunity to interact with him on Twitter. I know a lot of folks who have seen him talk live, and I'm pretty jealous of their work, of their ability to have done that. So one of these days I'll get to hear one of his live presentations. But one quote of his that has always really struck me is this one, that if you assign a project and you get back 30 of the exact same thing, that was not a project, that's a recipe. And so when we think about project-based learning, when we think about this idea of being curious, that planning is important, but that imagination is what makes the extraordinary possible, this is where we can get into the idea of letting students be able to use some of that creativity, some of that imagination. And it's not an either or. When we're thinking about planning or being creative, that we can actually do both of these and let them work together in a way that assists both in coming up with things that we've never done before. One of the mentions, one of the things that always comes up when folks talk about that 5-phase of the design process is this thing called the bias toward action. The sense that that it's good to get something started early, to try something early on, even if we know it's not going to be the final thing that we do. Even if we know it's not going to be the final draft, but we get something started early that we can work on and that we can try. It's a bias toward action. This poster is fairly famous for being up on the walls at Facebook for a long time, that done is better than perfect. That we can spend so much time trying to get something perfect that we never actually get to the end and we never actually use it for anything. And the question that comes along with that really then is, how do we come up with solutions that people can believe in? We think we have to get something perfect so that everybody will buy into it and believe in it. But the fact is The way we come up with solutions that people can believe in is when they see them work. And so getting a chance to try something and to try it and see where it doesn't work and then tweak it a little bit and come back and do something different, that's a very important part of the design thinking process. It's also a part of the process that does not come very naturally to us, especially in the education environment. There are a lot of us who don't like to try something unless we know it's going to work. We seem to have that idea as educators, and we see students who have the same thing as well. Sometimes they would rather not even attempt the assignment than try something that's not going to be seen as very good. One great way to get everybody over that, both the educators and the students, is to start adopting coding and to try to infuse coding into your curriculum. One great way to get started on that quickly and easily, there is a nifty little website that I learned about at OETC, at the Ohio EdTech Conference this year, from the folks at Spark Fun. They came up with this back for their 2014 Hour of Code submission, and they have put together an entire circuit board. It's an Arduino board for those of you who are familiar with such things, but it's a virtual Arduino board, circuit board, and there's an entire programming interface that goes along with it so that you can learn how to code. And let me tell you, when you learn how to code, you learn very quickly that your first attempt generally doesn't work. But you immediately get feedback on whether it works or not, and you immediately get a chance to go back and try it again. And those are the key features in how you can embrace failure and really learn from it. One is that you get immediate feedback on whether it works or not. Secondly, that you immediately get a chance to try again. Those two key features are very important in learning to fail and fail early from it, fail early and learning from it. Those two features are baked right in to coding, and this example from SparkFun is a great way to get both students and educators on board with this whole process and what it means and how it can really lead to great things at the end. Going back to an example from Brunel's life, though, I want to mention a disaster that happened. Back in Brunel's day, when he first started designing bridges, bridges were built with wrought iron and oak planks for railway bridges. And that was just kind of the best that they knew how to use at the time. One of Brunel's bridges that he built, when a train passed over it, some hot embers from the boiler on the train hit the oak planking and caught the oak planking on fire. The heat from the fire warped and destroyed the wrought iron, and it destroyed the bridge. So one of Brunel's contemporaries, one of his competitors, Robert Stevenson, heard about this, and when Stevenson was just completing his Dee River Bridge, he went out and decided, that thing that just happened to Brunel's bridge, that's not going to happen to my bridge. And so he had the oak planks covered with ballast, thinking that this will douse any hot embers that come from the train and want to hit the wood and would catch it on fire. Well, he coated the planks with ballast, but then the very next passenger train that crossed that bridge, the added weight from the ballast caused the bridge to collapse. Several people died in that tragedy. And at that point, the British Parliament stepped in and said, we need to establish some parameters about how bridges are going to be built from now on. And they asked Brunel to give them some rules that they should use. But Brunel knew that they did not want to build bad bridges. Brunel also knew that they would know more about building good bridges in 6 months, in 3 years, and in 5 years than they knew then. And not long after that, Brunel started work on a brand new bridge. It was the longest bridge ever constructed at the time, and it began using a technology that he determined came to be called the suspension bridge. And when he built the Clifton suspension bridge, it was the first of its type. It was the longest of its day, and it is still in use today. And that very same design you will recognize as being used in many, many bridges nowadays, all because they realized that they needed to find a new and better way to do something that had never been done before. Planning is important, but imagination is what really makes the extraordinary possible when we teach like we're Brunel. All right, so that's 4 rules, and there is a 5th rule. But the fact is, I cannot actually tell you what the 5th rule is here, because I have found in my work in education that every educator has their own different 5th rule. Everybody has their own little unique perspective and their own unique things that have prompted them to do amazing things as educators. And as you have listened to the first 4 of these rules, I would encourage you to think about what your 5th rule might be and who exemplifies it. I've got a collage that's coming up here. Here are some people that in past workshops, this is just a few of the people that educators have told me who represents the 5th rule for them. And this represents a lot of other rules that people have told me. You'll see a little picture of Abraham Lincoln in the top center there. Even when 2 different people pick Lincoln as the exemplar for their 5th rule, they might have 2 completely separate rules in mind for what it represents for them. But what that 5th rule is for you is part of what makes you a very unique educator. And it's very rarely for students and for educators is it a connection to content that really sparks a deep love of learning. It is a connection to a person, and that connection to a person then leads to exploring deeper content that leads to great learning for us and for our students. I want to show you a little tool that I like to use with this. You can use it for a lot of other activities too, but I really like it for this one. ReadWriteThink.org has a set of biographical trading cards that you can make. There is a browser-based version of this that uses Flash. Not to worry if you are an iOS user. There is a mobile app that goes along with this as well, so you can use this on your iOS devices, your iPhone or your iPad. And it just lets you create a trading card. It prompts you for some information to put in about the person. You can see I've started one here on somebody who may be kind of familiar to many of you. But you fill in the information. You fill in the information front and back. When you're done, you're able to export this as a PDF file. So you can print these. You can actually print them, cut them out, or you can save them electronically. If you want to work on one and come back to it later, there is no account or anything that you have to set up to use this. You start working on one, you can save your work as a native file and then load it back in and work on it again later on if you want. But anybody can use this. It not only works, they have a version of this not only for people, they also have a version of this for places and other ideas. So you can use this to create an entire set of trading cards for whatever topic that you might be dealing with. All right, so for your classroom tomorrow, the question then comes up, how might we foster the development of design thinking in our students and in our own instructional design? And the best answer to this question, I really think, comes with those first 3 words. How might we? Whenever we look at our class, our school, anything, and start with a question that begins with, how might we do such and so? That is the key to helping us define and start looking at a problem where we can start this design process to build empathy, to define a problem, to create solutions for that problem that we're going to refine over time. And then to really start applying those rules, those tips for design thinking in the manner of folks like Banksy, Da Vinci, Chanel, Brunel, and whatever talents and passions that we bring to the table as well. I like to include this last slide in just about every presentation I do, and it makes a whole lot of sense here as well. Because when we look at the students that we're working with, I always try to think of this quote, when you plant lettuce, if it doesn't grow well, you don't blame the lettuce. You look for reasons that it's not doing well. It might need more fertilizer, more water, less sun. You look for reasons that it is not doing well, but you never blame the lettuce. And just a little dose of design thinking can be what it takes to take students from where they are to doing things that even they never believed that they would be able to do. All right, we are going to hang around.
All right, thank you, Michael. So much to think about, to take back to our classrooms and implement these 5 tips or these 5 rules of design thinking into our classroom. So just a couple of last things before I share the link for your contact hour certificate. If you want more training, first and foremost, Michael does do a design thinking workshop where it can look really different depending on what your district might need. He has done a half day or a single day workshop. He has done a 3-day workshop or 5 days extended over maybe a semester or a year, a workshop. So it was a big challenge that I gave him, asking him to sort of condense this down to a 1-hour webinar with some takeaways for you. But I think he did a great job. So, and again, Michael and I talk a lot with the teachers we work with about the ISTE standards for students and teachers and coaches. ISTE being the International Society for Technology and Education. Um, and they do have standards for each of these areas. With the new student standards released last June, design thinking or innovative designer, all of these concepts, that is a standard for students now to be able to compete globally, to follow this design thinking process. And then in the drafts of the new teacher standards, design thinking is also going to be an important skill for teachers to have in order to share it with students. So lots and lots of reasons that you and your teachers may want to have Michael out or explore design thinking a little bit more. So I have my email there. You can also find it all over our website. Contact me if you're interested in bringing him out for a full, more hands-on, in-depth version of this little webinar snippet that you got to see. In addition, we also offer a 4-day technology integration boot camp. And our next boot camp that we have coming up is March 23rd and 24th, and April 27th through 28th. Sorry, this slide must have got out of order. That slide's not updated. So our next boot camp that we will do at Forward Edge actually starts next week, next Thursday and Friday, and then the back half of it will be about a month later in April. We also can come to you. So if you have a handful of people, we like to keep this boot camp group small because it's tons and tons of learning. But if you have about 8 to 15 people, we will come to you. And you are also eligible for 2 hours of graduate level credit from Ashland University. So if you are interested in that, you can go to forward-edge.net/PD bootcamp for more information, to register, and to see all of the session descriptions. And then, of course, we offer our free monthly webinars on the 3rd Wednesday of every month at 4 o'clock Eastern. Our next webinar next month will be April 19th, and we are going to be talking about and showing you Google Drive for Teams or Google Team Drives. So go ahead, I've just shared the link in the chat, and make sure that you sign up for to see Google Team Drives and how that can change your collaboration and sharing within your teams at your schools. So if you have any questions, please let Michael or I know just using the Q&A or the group chat area, and we would be happy to answer those. We'll stick around for a few more minutes, but I want to make sure that everybody gets what they're looking for. So if you follow this link here, you can actually, it's just a short 5-question quiz. And if you get 4 out of the 5 questions correct, it will automatically email you a certificate of attendance for 1 contact hour that you can use for renewals. So if there are any questions, again, please share those in the chat or the Q&A. I will stick around for a couple of minutes just to make sure that there aren't any more questions coming through. And if not, everyone have a wonderful rest of your week. And thank you so much for spending your Wednesday evening with us.